Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me.
We can't hear. Hold on one second. Might be me.
Oh, do it on the TV.
Yeah. Where is that? You have the remote? Oh, I have the remote.
It's not for
I mean, it's supposed to be, but it's. Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, ladies, let's try not talk.
I can try a microphone if that helps.
No, this is not it.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes, we could. Yes.
Okay, so we'll try and do this like this. I understand you're going to go out to see the eclipse in a few minutes. So let me just tell you a little bit about the eclipse from the viewpoint of Chazal and some hashkafa on the topic, which is the Gemara in Sukkah. The end of the second paragraph of Sukkah talks about eclipses and says that eclipses are signs from Shemayim. It'll come back in a couple of minutes. It says if you have a lunar eclipse, then lunar eclipse is a bad sign for Am Yisrael, because the Am Yisrael is likened to the moon, in that just like the moon waxes and wanes and receives its light from another source, so too we wax and wane. We go have Golus and Geula, and also receive our light from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When there's a solar eclipse, it's a machlokus there in Chazal. One opinion in Chazal is that it's also not a good sign for the Jews, because there's a mashal when a teacher comes to school with a belt and is about to hit someone, the person who has to be afraid to be hit, the person gets hit all the time. The person who gets hit all the time is usually Jewish people, because we get all sorts of afflictions. So therefore, it's a bad sign for us. The other opinion there, that's Rabbi Meir. Chachamim say that it's a bad sign for the non-Jews, because the non-Jews use the solar calendar and we use the lunar calendar. So therefore, it's a bad sign for them when there's a solar eclipse, because the sun represents the non-Jews, moon represents us. And the Gemara says, depending on what it looks like, if it's red, then it's a sign there's going to be war. If it's black, it's a sign there's going to be famine. And the Gemara then gives us several averos for which in general eclipses happen. And the obvious question is, well, nowadays we know that we can predict eclipses, right? We know when they are going to occur. We know that a solar eclipse can only occur around the time of Rosh Chodesh, because it has to be when there's an alignment between the sun, the moon in the middle, and the earth. And that's when you can't see the moon, because all the light of the sun is going to what we call the dark side of the moon. But really, at that point, it has all the light of the moon, so we can't see it. We can't see the moon. The moon is completely dark and obscures the sun. So a lunar eclipse can only occur around Tes Vav, the 15th day of the month, because it's when the earth comes between the sun and the moon. If the moon is above at the right angle, you have a full moon. But if it's a little bit lower and there's a direct alignment between the sun and the earth and the moon, so then there is a lunar eclipse. The moon is darkened. So the question is, we can predict when that's going to happen. We can predict it based on the plane, the angle, and based on the time of month. So how could it possibly be a bad or good sign? So the Mefarshim explain, among them Reb Shlomo Fisher, who was a great Baal Machshava of the 20th century, says that these things are built into the Bria. And Reb Tzadok HaKohen says there are places, times, and people that Chazal called Muad Lepuranos. They have a special proclivity, special inclination towards negativity. For example, Chazal says Shechem is Mokam Muad Lepuranos. Bad things happen in Shechem. Yosef was sold there, the kingdom was divided there, bad things happened there. Bein HaMetzorim is a time Muad Lepuranos. First Beis HaMikdash, second Beis HaMikdash, bad things, they were destroyed during Bein HaMetzorim, bad things happen. And obviously people who are inclined to be bad, be big Rishonim. But it says in Tzaddik, there's no, everything which can be true in one direction is true in the other direction. If you have a potential for great evil, you have a potential for great good. You have potential for great tragedy, you have potential for great wonders and positive phenomena. and so on and so forth. In other words, Shechem is a place where great things can happen if it's used the right way. Bein HaMetzorim was supposed to be a very holy time. It was misused, and therefore negative things happen. It's very similar to what the Ramban writes when the Ramban moved to Eretz Yisrael in the 1200s. He said, "Kol ha-mekudosh yoser, shamem yoser." The more holy a place was, the more the desolation is today. In other words, the higher they are, the harder they fall. But they were higher, as they can get higher. Am Yisrael is like that as well. Am Yisrael, we can fall very far, but we can rise very high. That's what the Gemara Ksuva says, that when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was walking outside Yerushalayim, he saw that there was a woman who had been a great woman, very rich, who was gathering kernels of wheat from the dung of the animals of the Arabs. And he said, Am Yisrael, there's nobody like you. When you're up, you're really up. And when you're down, you're really down. And then the idea is that everything which has potential is great potential either way. So therefore, when we have something like an eclipse, which could be a negative thing, it also has great potential to be positive if it's used the right way. So Shlomo Fisher says, even though Chazal say that the solar eclipse is something which has to do with the nations of the world, and we hope, and we should daven when we look at the eclipse, or not look at the eclipse, that the eclipse should mark a bad sign for our enemies, and we have unfortunately many enemies who we would like to see eclipsed. Also, he says there's an aspect of our own cheshbon hanefesh, and Am Yisrael itself has two aspects: the lunar aspect and the solar aspect. What are the two aspects, lunar and solar, of Am Yisrael? So he says the lunar aspect is our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how we relate to Hashem. In other words, Hashem is the sun, we're the moon, we receive a light to Hashem. A lunar aspect is how we receive our life from Kosh Baruch Hu. And if there was a lunar eclipse, we have to make a cheshbon hanefesh. How is our relationship with Hashem? Because a solar relationship is our relationship to the nations of the world. Because we are the Or LaGoyim. We're the sun. We're supposed to illuminate to the nations of the world. And says Shlomo Fisher, that the mission of the Mamlechas Kohen B'Goy Kadosh and be the Or LaGoyim is always our mission. Whether we're doing a good job of it or not, it's like the sun is always providing light. We are the light to the world. And therefore, since we're the light to the world, we have to constantly be concerned with our making a Kiddush Hashem to the world. And that's the idea which you have to mind when we go to see a solar eclipse. Are we being the Or LaGoyim? Are each one of us making the Kiddush Hashem, which we should be making in this world, or not? And obviously, it's a collective thing. All of Am Yisrael is in this together, but each one of us as individuals also is responsible for our own Kiddush Hashem and how we relate to other people to make sure that we represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. So therefore, again, there are two aspects to the solar eclipse. One is that we hope our enemies are eclipsed. That is a very, very important thing to have in mind when we look at solar eclipse, that it should be a siman ra for our enemies. But the other aspect is to have in mind that it's supposed to be for us to look at ourselves and make a cheshbon hanefesh as to our Kiddush Hashem, how we are conducting ourselves in this world in order that everybody else could see V'ro Kishem Hashem Nikra Alecha V'yor Mimeka. Okay, is that clear? Any questions? Good. So when you go out, please have all that in mind. Okay, enjoy.
Thank you.
Okay, ready, ladies? So we're gonna go out.
Hopefully that helped a little bit. Finished.